How do I
And
button it up? Yeah.
this was years ago now that this occurred. And every time you have a loss, you have an opportunity to push through and have
Yeah.
that grit and that mindset shift to push through. And that opportunity is invaluable
Yeah.
because you can't know what you're made of, and you can't have that confidence that I now have going, no matter what happens, unless it's some crazy health issue that I can't solve, then I can push through. They think I got to buy the rental myself or buy
Yeah.
the fix and flip deal myself, and I got to manage the contractors. I got to put up all the money. I got to get the financing and do all that work, which is a major learning curve. And as soon as I teach people these strategies, which we teach people these things all day long because I show
Mhm.
them what we do,
Yeah. So here's a question for you. What's the single most important thing you've learned starting and owning and running OCG properties?
so the single most thing that I've learned is how to delegate things correctly and set up team members that are doing certain aspects of the job for you. For example, if I'm involved in every aspect of the asset management of a project
Mhm.
versus having a full-time person doing that, I'm going to be spread. That mindset piece is so strong now that hey, I had a company where I had to fire my chief operating officer for stealing from us and things like
Mhm.
that on another deal that we were dealing with, right? I was able to push through that. Don't get
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using Newcalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Matthew Owens, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So, with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today, and then we want to talk about what you're doing with OCG Properties and how unbelievably important I feel it is, especially today in today's environment. We're in the middle of one of the largest transfers of wealth in our nation's history, some $98 trillion according to the federal government, of wealth is being passed from baby boomers to their millennial kids and grandkids. And they really want that money to work for them. And this is a great opportunity for somebody like you to help them. So I love what you guys are doing. So thanks again for being here, bud.
No problem at all. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. Look forward to, telling the story and the trials and tribulations I went through as an entrepreneur and business owner and, all about my life, man. It's been a journey, I'll tell you that. So
Well, we're all about the journey, bud. So where were you born?
I was born in Southern California, so in Torrance actually, and grew up middle class family. My dad was a CPA. My mom was an engineer, not by trade. She actually got a degree in home ec, and then became an engineer afterwards. And my dad was a ranger and a sniper in Vietnam, and I grew up, I'd say as a latchkey kid, right? Just like we all, did. I'll say the last generation where they said come home before the street lights turn on, and I don't
Yeah,
care where the hell you are otherwise, right?
right.
So, and that's where I grew up, and grew up as a good family and everything like that, of course. And parents separated when I was around 10 years old. Still became good friends, of course, afterwards. And I got double the Christmas presents, so it was a lot of fun, doing that, right?
Cash
But
in on that deal.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, but they luckily I got lucky and they lived, a couple of miles away from each other. I was able to walk between houses and stuff like that, and right next to the high school in Torrance, California. And I actually grew up just like everybody else. It's like, hey, go to school, go to get a degree in college, go get a good job, work up the corporate ladder, and and push towards that direction, right? And
Mhm.
I actually got pretty good grades in high school, and was looking for colleges, and my dad of course wanted me to join the military. He's like, hey, go join the Rangers. He took me to a Ranger reunion, and at that time, of course, it was the weekend after I went to UC Santa Barbara to visit the campus there and all these parties, and I'm like, no, I think I'm going to UC Santa Barbara, Dad. Sorry, I'm not going to join the Rangers here.
Mhm.
Of course, it's 17 years old. You're like, no, that's not important to me, right?
Yeah.
And
And there's
and then,
girls at UC Santa Barbara.
oh yeah,
Let's be honest, there's girls there.
that's all that mattered, right? That's all that mattered if
Come
you're
on.
17
You're
to
17
25
years
years
old.
old,
Give me a
right?
break, right?
So it's actually the reason. It's funny. I wanted to be an architect at first, and I didn't realize at Santa Barbara they didn't have architecture school. I just was like, I'm going there. I don't
Yeah.
care. And I got into like my second year at Santa Barbara, and my dad was like, "Hey, what do you want to do? And what's your focus?" And I was like, "Hey, I don't think I'm not going to leave this school. They don't have architecture school here." He's like, "You can go to another school if you want to." And I'm
Mhm.
like, "No, there's girls with squirt gun fights everywhere. I'm not going
Right.
anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm just going to be a CPA like you, Dad, and that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to focus on economics and accounting." He's like, "You're never going to have spring break again. You're never going to have fun again during a tax season. What's wrong with you? You're
Yeah.
making your degree over girls." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's what every 18 or 19 years old person is thinking about at that time, or every boy,
Okay.
right?"
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so I actually did the economics thing, got really good grades in it and stuff like that. Was living 2 minutes walking from the beach. It was incredible,
Mhm.
campus to go to school at and everything. And had to take summer school to make up a few classes for my freshman year, of course, and learning the lessons the hard way. Um, but I ended up getting a degree in economics and accounting, and
Mhm.
as soon as I finished that I went and got a job at a CPA firm where I
Mhm.
was doing taxes and audit, and realized that I didn't know anything about economics or accounting until I worked at the CPA firm. All the stuff from college was just theory and didn't really teach you how to make money at all, or real knowledge base, right? And
Yeah.
I think my professional writing class was good, and things like that kind of give you a well-rounded understanding of how to communicate with people. So, but if I would go back, I'd be doing sales and psychology and all this other type of stuff to learn that side of the business, right? But at the end of the day, I quit my CPA. I went and worked at the CPA firm doing tax and audit. I was just bored out of my mind. Just wanted to bang my head against the computer, going, I can't emotionally do this anymore. Like I
Yeah.
wanted to cry on the way to work, just miserable. And my stepbrother came to me, and he was an engineer and sick and tired of his job, and he's like, "Hey, you got to come to this class with me. It's next Friday. Come check it out." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll come. Don't worry." I was totally gonna flake on him. And the day of the course comes up, and he's like, "Oh, you got to come check it out." And he made me go, and it was a real estate course, and I was just looking for something else anyways,
Yeah.
going, how do I get out of this? And I had just read Rich Dad Poor Dad about how to, thinking, hey, I'm making the wrong type of money. I need to trade my time for building assets that create cash flow for me instead
Mhm.
of trading my time for money, and really being a slave to my labor the whole time. And I looked at the managers at the CPA firm, and they're working 10 times harder and more hours. I'm like, I don't want that. I don't
Yeah.
want to work at a CPA firm doing this monotonous stuff over and over again. And plus, I hated paying the IRS money. They just steal your money anyways, and that's my personality, right? So,
Right.
at the end of the day, I ended up getting my first deal under contract after taking this course, and I was going to make 30 grand on that flip deal, and I ended up making 20 because I did my math wrong, of course, on
Mhm.
my first flip.
Forgot to carry a
And
7.
yeah, exactly. It was like this was 2006.
Yeah.
So I quit my CPA firm job literally in 2006, and I was a real estate genius flipping houses and all this stuff and killing it until late 2007, when I
Yeah.
realized I was not a genius
Yeah.
and I didn't know crap. And I realized that I literally took the biggest punch in the face of my life, and an ego hit too, because I had a 790 credit score. I'd never
Mhm.
missed a payment in my life. I thought I was a good business owner because my bookkeeping was done, because I'm a CPA.
Mhm.
No matter what they
Mhm.
looked like, I was still, thinking I was great. And we are flipping a lot of houses. We got an office at the World Trade Center in Long Beach on like the 23rd floor. And my ego was like, I'm dope. And
Mhm.
realizing, no, I'm not dope. I didn't know what I was doing yet. And it was a majorly humbling experience for me where, I realized, like, oh my God, this is crazy. I can't, do this I can't believe this. I'm looking at job boards going, no, that's
Mhm.
just misery again.
Right.
And I went and started taking my financial planning classes and things like that to learn more, and hunkered down. And I ended up taking 200 grand out of my credit cards to pay my investors back at the time, because back then they could get 290 grand worth of empty credit card lines we had, and it just
Mhm.
kept increasing them. And I ended up taking that money out. And since then, I hunkered down. Investors saw what I did for them, and they ended up reinvesting with me. And so I started doing joint ventures with these investors where I'd make $5,000 a pop for the renovation management and acquisition fees on each deal. And we started doing 5 of those a month consistently because it was easy to buy houses right then, of course, right? And so then we started buying them, great discounted properties, great cash flow. And then I started doing 5 of those a month, making 25,000 a month doing that consistently. And now we've flipped a little bit over 1,000 houses. We have over 35 million now lent out to flippers in different markets where we make interest rate spreads on those funds. And I've raised over 150 million now for real estate. And, one of the things that I skipped over during that process that I mentioned to you was right before I quit to go into real estate. I lost my father when I was 26 years old, and he was 56 years old of skin cancer. And he was my crutch, right, in life. And he was the person that I would look up to. He was the guy I went to whenever I had problems and would tell me, straighten me out, right? He'd be like, no, you can't cheat on your taxes. You're doing it by the book, right? So, and he was a CPA telling me the right thing to do every time, right? And it made me really strong, actually. At the end of the day, it screwed me up too, because I told him, hey, I'll take care of my little sister that's 1 at a time, and my little brother that was 3 years younger than me at the time. And I kind of took everything on my shoulders to take care of the family at the time. And I realized later that's why I was working 14-hour days and pushing like crazy, and kind of letting my own health and everything else go to the detriment, because I was just so focused on one thing. And, that's it. Right. And I kept telling my wife, which was my girlfriend at the time, don't worry, 2 more years and I'll be done. I'll retire in 2 years, So you realize that could be further from the truth, right? It's 18 years in now. I'm still having fun doing it, but I've been able to structure my life a lot better now, where I got a lot more free time. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and my son is 9, my daughter is 6. And I say that my son beats me up physically and my daughter beats me up emotionally. So it's a lot of fun. Her favorite thing in the world to do is slap me in the face with her feet over and over again, her dirty feet. So it's a great thing, though, to teach them entrepreneurship now and teach them the strategies that I learn about financial freedom and how to create that wealth in your life so that you can be free. So you got cash flow coming in that's set up to cover all your monthly expenses, so that you can actually have that time freedom that everybody strives for, that everybody working for a job, you have that consistency of income coming in that everybody really wants in their soul, like to cover them. But then as an entrepreneur, or, if you don't have that, it really is a yearning for that security, right? And so being able to create these cash flow streams enable that in people to give them that freedom. And that's what I really love about doing this, is teaching people those types of strategies.
That's cool, man. That's cool. Do you mind if we go back a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Well, I just have a couple of things I want to ask you. So
For sure.
So growing up in Torrance, by the way, Torrance was the place that my father went to on his last assignment with a company called Mako Auto Painting and Body Works, MAACO. He flew there from Oklahoma. It was 17 degrees on the ground in Oklahoma with a wind chill that was in the single digits. They had to de-ice his plane twice to get him off the tarmac into the air. He flew to LAX. When he got off the plane in LAX, they beat the sun going down to LAX. When he got off the plane, it was sun shining, not a cloud in the sky, and it was 82 degrees.
Nice.
He nearly kissed the tarmac. Okay. So he goes to Torrance. It's his last assignment with Mako out in the field. He'd been all over the US and Canada putting in Mako centers. This was the last one. And that Torrance center ended up being pivotal. We ended up moving to California. We were supposed to go to San Antonio, Texas. So 45 years ago, here in about a week, 45 years ago, we moved to California, to Oceanside.
That's awesome. I mess with my friends in the Midwest and the South and the people I do business with out of state. In December, I'm sitting there on a video camera showing them, look how beautiful it is out here right now. It's 80 degrees and it's snowing over there. And they're like, so
yeah, it's perfect, man. That is perfect. So nothing like rubbing it in a little, right?
Yeah, of course.
So growing up in Torrance, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
I feel like it was a great place to grow up. I feel like it felt safe to me. You can walk home from school consistently. The sun was always great. It was obviously not raining a lot and things like that. I feel like there was a good infrastructure here in Southern California for that. that purpose. And there was a lot of, the neighbors were friendly. You're going and playing with the neighborhood kids all the
Mhm.
time and things like that, outside, and you're just outside nonstop, right?
Yeah.
There's no snow days and things like that, right? You're outside down the street and you don't come home, like I was saying earlier, until the street lights come on. Parents don't know where you're at, and I'm probably breaking bones. I think I was in the hospital 21 times before I was 18 from, broken bones and sprained ankles and all kinds of crazy
Wow.
stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was really the sunshine and feeling safe and feeling like you could walk anywhere. And, it was a really a friendly environment for a lot of people, I think, out here. And it was really have some great memories from being a kid in that arena and out here and just like, having that family around me, having tons of friends. And my dad used to teach all the neighborhood kids and help them with their homework and stuff like that. So we had a lot. I was living around the block from the high school, so it was perfect opportunity to play basketball outside every day and things like that. So yeah.
That's cool, man. So growing up, I think we know the answer to this already, but growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
So it was probably my dad. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, my dad was the guy I looked up to when he had cancer. We were outside and, we'd sit there and talk back and forth in my 20s. Of course, at that time, I wanted to talk about nothing but girls. And he's like, can we
Yeah.
talk about something else? And
Yeah.
I'm like, what else is there, Dad? There's nothing else right now. And
You're such a one-track mind, man.
right, but he let me make my mistakes too, right?
Yeah.
He's like, "Hey, that might not be a good idea because of this, but do what you want." And
Right.
I made my mistakes, getting, being too tired and, rolling into somebody in a car and, against his advice and, doing stupid stuff, all the time when you're a kid, just making your own mistakes. And he really was my moral compass at the end of the day. And then later on, it became, Kobe Bryant, because at the end of the day, that Mamba mentality when it comes to real estate investing and owning a business of
Yeah.
consistent grit, pushing forward all the time, and doing that really like permeates with you. I have a bit his basketball card. I've had it on my desk since I started my firm or my company, to do this. And that mindset is so important for every aspect of business. And my dad, a lot of times I was his crutch as well. When my parents got a divorce, I was definitely there for him quite a bit as well. And I saw the strength in him though too, with the military aspect, where he's the ranger and a sniper. He was a black belt in Hapkido, and he was somebody that I could look up to because he always did the right thing, right?
Yeah.
He might have a temper sometimes, just like anybody that's that age or in the military, I'll say. But the boomer type, mentality of
Mhm.
they're just harder men back then, right?
Mhm.
And you realize the strength that comes with that is really important. He showed a lot of strength and kind of gave me that strength as well, and that confidence at the end of the day to make my own mistakes and push forward. And um, I still, every time there's an Iron Man movie, when someone dies at the end or a parent and a kid, I'm get teary-eyed. It's been
Mhm.
20 years now and it still hits me, pretty hard.
Yeah.
And you realize that I had to step up and be the father figure in my family's life and be the one that everybody looked up to, because I was the one with the financial knowledge now and not
Mhm.
just him, right? I was the one that was going to help lead the family and things like that. And it really, took a lot out of me, I know for sure, but at the same time made me really strong.
That's cool, man. That's awesome. What a great story.
Yeah.
So, so in high school, and I think we already know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask anyway. In high school, did you have a favorite subject?
So in high school, it was probably math, but at the end, because I was good at it, maybe not calculus because I hated that crap, but
Yeah.
it seemed pointless to me,
Right.
to do calculus. I
Yeah.
didn't see
What's
the
the use, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm not gonna go be an engineer or anything. I had no
Right.
interest in that piece. But in high school, it was that I had a home study type class where, or it was like a home group where we would do certain things, where we made like a booklet about our high school years and all that
Mhm.
stuff. And I still had a thing in there where my all the where we would collect all this stuff for our about our history and everything that we've been through, and it made us create this giant book of pictures. And what's interesting is that in that book was the everything that my dad used to tell me and my son. He did a printout for us about, like, hey, go get a coat. I said, go get a coat. Stop fighting with your brother. Stop fighting with your brother again, right? Go eat vegetables. Get outside. Get off the TV. Like all those things. And I got to read it at his funeral at the end of the day, and everybody was laughing about it and stuff like that. And you realize the importance of saving those memories and stuff like that. And that was one major class that I felt like was super important to me in school, in high school specifically. In college, it was my professional writing class, because of the communication thing I was mentioning to you
Mhm.
earlier, as well as I'll say my human sexuality classes. So I knew what diseases I didn't want to get in Santa Barbara, you know, so
Yeah. Among
it
other
scared,
things, right?
it scared the heck out of me. Right.
Yeah.
You're like, all
Among
right,
other
you
things,
know,
yeah, right?
so
So in high school, did you have a favorite teacher?
Yes, I did. So, her name was Miss Brennis. She actually passed away. So she was the Spanish teacher, and really, really influential. It's always the teachers that try to connect with you personally that you can tell care about you
Yeah.
versus having a moody teacher or someone that's just running through curriculum and stuff like that. Those people have a big impact on you, massively. Also, the basketball coaches and things like that, because they would push you to that next level and see what you're made of at the end of the day. That was a big influence on me as well, that having the basketball coaches there, and have some good memories of that, and taking a beating in basketball practice quite a bit, earning your stripes, making you get up at 5 in the morning for basketball practice, right? So those things put some hair on your chest, I'll say.
Somebody studied under John Wooden, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it's pretty. It's funny because he was actually the my basketball coach actually coached with Wooden as well, as a like
Sounds like
a
it.
yeah. It was really interesting. So he brought some of that with him. So
So let me ask you a question about Wooden. Why do you think he taught his players how to tie their shoes?
yeah, you beat me. Maybe it's the so they don't trip over them, in the practice or in the game or anything like that. Maybe you know, it's like the thing about making your bed every day to make sure
Mhm,
that your stuff is in order consistently, and you start with the fundamentals, right? It's
mhm.
like cutting your fingernails before basketball practice, or so you don't scratch people, or tying your shoes to make sure that everything's, you don't have to think about that or worry about it, right? I don't know, maybe that's it. I'm just guessing, but that sounds about right.
Details matter.
Ah, there you go.
Details matter. There is no detail that doesn't matter, right? And that's literally, it was from the ground up, from your shoes all the way up. Everything, you tucked your jersey in, you
Mhm.
did everything you were supposed to do. You tied the string around your waist, in your shorts, everything.
Right.
Everything was done uniformly, right? Or with uniformity, pardon me. And it was done specifically because details matter. And that's literally like none of their shoes ever came untied during a game. Didn't come untied during practice, right? Everything, details matter. And once you check that detail off, you can move on to the next thing. And what you focus on grows, right? And that
Right.
was the whole idea. The whole idea behind the pinnacle of success, or the pyramid of success, is all about focus. So anyway,
Awesome.
so so after high school, you go to college at UC Santa Barbara, which is one of the prettiest campuses
It's
and one of the
amazing.
prettiest places on the planet,
Right.
period. Right? Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. UC Santa Barbara is an amazing school because of where it's located, but also because of all the other things that you learn when you go there, right? So after college, you get into you go and become a CPA. So you pass the CPA exam, all that kind of thing, right?
Yep.
And then you figure out that it's just not for you, right? It's like, come on, what am
Right.
I doing to myself, right? What made you decide to read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
So I was honestly bored at my CPA firm job. You're doing monotonous tax returns, and the audits are very cookie cutter consistently every year. And I actually one of the actual main clients that I was working on was a real estate company that actually did big multifamilies and got government subsidies, so they needed audits and things like that. And so one of the actual owners of that company that I'm seeing buy, giant multi-million dollar
Mhm.
buildings all over the country and stuff like that. He's like, hey, he recommended a couple books to me, and
Mhm.
one was that book. The other one was Think and Grow Rich,
Mhm.
and both amazing books, of course, for that mindset shift that a lot of people
Mhm.
need to say, wow. And then I realized when I read that book that, oh my God, I am making the wrong type of income. I should like why, granted, he was really hard on college and stuff like that. I feel like college has its place when you're taking specific strategic classes or learning to grow up. Honestly, like you're
Yeah.
on your own. That grow up process is super necessary to make your own mistakes and get out there and do those things. But from a making money perspective,
Yeah.
unless you're going in being an engineer or a CPA in that space, then it's going to be, it's not going to necessarily help you, make money and become wealthy, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, they make more money than people that are not going to college, statistically, of course. But at the end of the day, the learning how to be an entrepreneur or make money in different ways is not taught in those schools specifically. So, you know, I feel like that piece of it, learning and understanding and having that aha moment with the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, as well as Think and Grow Rich, realizing that if I add value to as many people as possible and
Mhm.
stick to these specific things, then I'll be able to be, wealthy. And it's funny because when I quit my CPA firm job, I'm like, I'm going to have all this time. I'm going to be able to go and, go to the gym every day and all this. And then you're like, wow, that's 14-hour days of hard knocks learning where your learning curve is like through the roof the
Mhm.
entire time. And if I would have known how hard it is, I may have stayed at the CPA firm job longer and just dealt with the pain while I tried over here
Yeah.
and not known, but I just threw myself to the wolves and I'm like, I can always go back to that pain if I had to.
I
So
got you.
that's really where it came from. But yeah, that book changed my life. There's a lot of books that change your life, and it's super important to consistently read and learn every single possibility you can.
So you get into flipping houses and real estate investing in earnest in 2006,
Yes.
and everything's going great guns, firing on all cylinders, the whole thing. The Great Recession hits in 2008, and all of us remember it, right?
Yeah.
Except for those that are listening to this that were too young to remember. But we all remember it, those of us that were, lived through it, right, as adults. What was the number one thing that you learned from the 2008 Great Recession that you keep with you today?
So there's a couple of things.
Okay.
First was study economics, know what the heck is happening in the market
Yeah.
because there was predictability signs that you could see that this was going to come across the board where there was a lot of risk on the market, right?
Yeah.
And these black swan events like lack of liquidity in the banks that occurred at that time from the Lehman Brothers moment that occurred was really
Mhm.
one of the biggest reasons why the entire market crashed in the first place because there was no liquidity in the market. The next thing that I learned was don't rely on banks because
Yeah.
our strategy at the time was buy them, renovate them, we'd sell them to another investor. They'd immediately, with seller financing, they would immediately refinance and pay us off. And that
Mhm.
strategy was working. We were moving properties in 3 weeks or a month consistently and moving properties so fast it was crazy. And then all of a sudden the lending market stopped. And
Yeah.
we were like, that's our only exit strategy. What the heck do we do?
Yeah, we're stuck.
Yeah, and all these brokers came out of the woodwork saying, "Oh yeah, we can finance it. We can finance it." We took it to like 10 different brokers thinking, "Great, let's get these things refinanced and off our plate." And none of them could actually pull the trigger and get it done. They didn't even know that there was no liquidity anymore in the market
Yeah.
at that time. And a lot of people found out months later that nothing was closing, right? And no appraisals were occurring anymore and things like that because the only buyers were cash buyers in that time, right?
Yeah.
And so that's when I started to learn how to raise private money and rely on private capital instead to bring that financing in house. One of those chief operating officers for the CPA firm client that was working on the multifamily buildings told me, bring the money in house, learn how to
Yeah.
deal with that money. And it just stuck with me in my head. And I'm like, that's what I should have learned at the time, was raising that capital. And that's when I started focusing on that. We called it the OCG Be the Bank program at the
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah.
Having people partner with us where we'd use all equity on these deals and then refinance later once the financing became available. And so, at that time, we were going to go through and lose a couple $100,000 of investor equity. And I had 290 grand worth of empty credit card lines available to me. And, a 790 credit score, never missed a payment in my life. My ego was like, my credit score is great. We're flipping properties all of a sudden,
Mhm.
and I'm dope, right? And realizing your ego just gets punched in the face as well during that time, which was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, honestly,
Yeah.
because you realize that humbling moment where you have to like take it in stride. And we took out 200 grand on the credit cards. I took it out and paid my investors back with that. And to see them reinvest with me because I had built the trust with them, I was just
Yeah.
thinking in my head, don't let them lose their money. That's hours of
Mhm.
their life that they just traded for this money. I'll find a way to make it back. I can't let them lose, right? And at the end of the day, they seeing what they did, it kind of set the tone for my entire investments strategy moving forward. Was always throw myself to the wolves first before my investors to take care of them. And it's served me over and over again, right? We've had
Yeah.
foreclosures we had to deal with in our lending business. My investors get paid anyways. We have a flip doesn't work out. My investors get paid anyways, right? As long as I can take the hit, then
Yeah.
I'm going to take the hit, and I've learned that lesson by and realizing that hit that I took, where I had to take that step down and get my ego squashed and hunker down at home and just grind through to survive,
Yeah.
was like one of the best learning curves I could have ever gone through in my life, because it taught me how to stand back up. Because no matter what happens, I don't care if you have a job, if you are an entrepreneur yourself, or whatever you're going through in your life, you're made when you stand back up from that hit that you
Mhm.
take, right? It's only temporary defeat unless you let your mindset take that hit. And don't get me wrong, I had to do some meditation. I had to go through and learn, internal things to be able to do that. That wasn't the only hit I took. I had a buddy of
Mm.
mine, misappropriate about $1 million that they cost me
Mm.
at the end of the day. We had a contractor steal $500,000 from us, right? And
Wow.
you go through these things where it shows you that, hey, you have to just find the solution. And I
Yeah.
had one instance where I bought my first multifamily building. It was a 12-unit building. And I totally underestimated what the rehab was supposed to be. I was supposed
Mhm.
to make like a 25% margin on the profits on this thing, and the rehab was double, right? The plumbing
Wow.
was falling apart in the plumber's hands underneath the building and stuff like that, where we had to do foundation work and subfloor work and all kinds of crazy stuff. And ended up selling the building and taking a $60,000 loss on that building. And I remember telling my wife, put your hand on my chest. Like, I can't breathe right now. I just lost a salary today. Like, this is like stressing me out, and I was
Mhm.
reacting wrong to it. And I say wrong, I was just stress reacting to it, letting my
Yeah.
alligator brain step in. And I remember the next day getting up and saying, no, I'm going to find a way to make this back. Like, I'm just going to,
Mhm.
what can I do? What action items can I take right now to make this happen? And I was already talking with a bunch of 1031 exchange investors that needed property. And I ended up finding another multifamily building that I was able to wholesale off and get it under contract and close 2 to 3 weeks later, where I made $70,000 on that deal. And my mindset shifted at that
Mhm.
time, where I'm like, wow, I just focused on the solution and made that happen through my efforts of doing this and focusing on that kind of deal. And at that point, after that, I became way stronger. Where that when that contractor stole 500,000 for us, yeah, I had about a day reaction where I was just like, oh man, let me go have a beer or something, or like let me
Mhm.
relax. And then I was able to just kind of wipe it off my shoulder and say, no, how do I? What's the action items? Focus
Yeah.
on action items, right? And through those trials and tribulations, you realize this is how you pick yourself back up. You
Mhm.
focus on solutions and don't dwell on that problem, and maybe meditate a little more to get your own emotions under control,
Right.
do some Wim Hof breathing and things like that, right? So to help you out with this. But those types of techniques and those emotional hacks really do help with the breathing and all that kind of stuff as well. And getting your health in order really
Mhm.
massively helps you as well, because you have that energy to push through in these
Yeah.
types of situations. So
And you also have the energy and the wherewithal to pay attention. That
yes,
$60,000 loss was a lesson, right?
right.
So you walk away from it going, it was expensive, but it was a lesson, right? Like you mentioned college and all that kind of stuff, and kind of how Kiyosaki talks about college. Kiyosaki talks about home ownership this way too,
Right.
where it's all about what it pays you, right? It's all
Right.
about what you know, from that investment, what do you make? And his thing is, not everybody's set up for college, right? Not everybody is necessarily, especially when you're 17, 18 years old and you're coming out of high school, you don't really know what you want to do, most people. And so you're in college and you're sort of spinning your wheels, and yeah, you're having fun, and yeah, there's girls and all that kind of stuff, right? But what he's thinking is, if you're there and you're sort of aimless, you're really just wasting your time. What you should be doing is going out and getting productive, right?
Right.
And then you figure out eventually what you want to do. You can always go back to school, right?
Right.
So, it's a different philosophy. But in this case, it's something where you could have lost more than 60 grand on that place, right? You
Absolutely.
had the loss, you went out, you figured out a way to take care of the loss. But the thing that's most important, especially with the contractor, is you learned, right?
Right.
And now you won't be doing that again. You won't be losing another $500,000 with a contractor, because
Yes.
now you have systems in place
Right.
to hold people accountable, right?
What's funny is in that situation, you realize the importance of doing the little things, the background checks, the
Yeah.
criminal checks, the references, going out and
Mhm.
visiting the units consistently. In this case, the contractor did 2 properties perfectly, not even
Yeah.
a punch list from the inspector that goes out afterwards. It was
Yeah.
insanely amazing, right? And it was a setup. He basically, we gave him like 8 giant projects after that, and then he
Mhm.
went in and did the initial work, took pictures. It was fake pictures, fake permits, fake
Mhm.
city sign-offs, fake invoices for materials, all that stuff. And we gave him that second draw, and that's when my construction manager saw, hey, this invoice is weird because this company doesn't sell these AC systems. And we called the
Mhm.
company and realized it was a fake invoice. And we were like, oh no. And then if we would have done the background check, I just didn't check
Yeah.
one draw, and it cost me $500,000 because I went away from my procedures at one time, and I
Yeah.
realized, wow, the little things you were talking about,
Yeah.
those things matter massively to make sure you do them. And I just thought, oh no, this guy submitted everything perfectly. It's not going to be a problem. He was perfect on these other jobs. We got a great contractor. He totally had me duped. Now he's in jail for something else, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to get any money out. But it is what it is. It wasn't going to get any money anyways. But
Well,
yeah,
but you
these
learned, and that's the most important
right,
thing, right? You're better because of it. Okay.
absolutely,
And it could have cost you a bunch more than $500,000, bud, right?
yes,
It just
yes.
happened to be caught. And now you're watching those invoices. Now you're verifying those things. Now all of a sudden, right? And
Yep.
so that's something where it could have been 2, 3, 4 million. Okay.
Every time you take a loss, you're like, "Where's that left hook gonna hit me again?"
Yeah.
Or be able to what holes can I plug right now to fix this?
How do I
And
button it up? Yeah.
this was years ago now, that this occurred, and every time you have a loss, you have an opportunity to push through and have
Yeah.
that grit and that mindset shift to push through, and that opportunity is invaluable
Yeah.
because you can't know what you're made of, and you can't have that confidence that I now have going, no matter what happens, unless it's some crazy health issue that I can't solve, then I can push through. That mindset piece is so strong now that, hey, I had a company where I had to fire my chief operating officer for stealing from us and things like
Mhm.
that on another deal that we were dealing with, right? I was able to push through that. Don't get me wrong, I was waking up at 3:30 in the morning for a little while going, let me
Mhm.
meditate for a minute to
Yeah.
to get through this because I felt betrayed. But you deal with business partners, you deal with contractors, you deal with changes in the market, black swan events. There's going to be more, and there's
Yeah.
always going to be things that happen. But how do you push through, and what are you made of at that time to make you strong? And it really changes you as a person if you're able to push through that stuff and gives you that confidence you really need to be successful in life, period, no matter what
Yeah,
you're
I
doing. So
totally agree. 1000%. Okay. So let's talk about OCG properties. One of the beautiful things that you're doing that I think is the most compelling is you're literally helping you put a system together where people can use your professional knowledge, your wisdom, your experience. They can leverage that to actually have their money work for them. Talk about that for a second, because there are people out there, and we mentioned this before we hit record, but there are people out there that are inheriting money. We're in the single largest transfer of wealth in our nation's history.
right,
$98 trillion is getting moved, and people are receiving it and they want it to work for them. So talk about how you're making it work for them.
Absolutely. And most people when they invest in different strategies think, and I'll just relate this back to real estate, they think I got to buy the rental myself or buy
Yeah.
the fix and flip deal myself. And I got to manage the contractors. I got to put up all the money. I got to get the financing and do all that work, which is a major, major learning curve. And as soon as I teach people these strategies, which we teach people these things all day long because I show
Mhm.
them what we do,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh my God, that's scary. Can you just
Yeah.
do it for me?
Yeah.
And and what's funny is that they'll actually make the same, if not more, profits
Mhm.
by working with someone that already is a specialist in that specific area than having to go out and do it all themselves and go through a crazy learning curve. And the stress and the headaches that come with that, and additional risk because of taking on financing and all that stuff, versus you only kind of can lose what you invest when you're investing with someone else, right? And
Mhm.
so we've set up a system where on the single family side and the multifamily side and mobile home parks and those big projects like that, we've set up a system where we do all the asset management. We do all the work. The investors invest and invest with us either as joint ventures where we serve up properties on a silver platter for investors. We've invested and brought tons of investors, even from Japan and China. They've never seen the properties from us, and even set up translation services for them and things like that, where we've served it up on a silver platter and even helped them with what's called a cost segregation study, where you front load the tax benefits into year one and
Mhm.
get rid of all your taxes for that year. It's insane what you can
Mhm.
do with some of these cool strategies. I love, like I said, paying the IRS no money is the goal, right? And
Yeah.
so at the end
And
of
the
the day,
CPA thing comes in handy when you're talking
oh,
about cost segregation.
I didn't do the I'm still a CPA. I
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't continue with that career, but it's really the backbone to business,
Yeah.
understanding the accounting side and understanding the tax side and the legal structure side of things to structure the deals and all that, right?
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is that for investors, they can invest passively where they don't have to do the work in single families and multifamilies and in mobile home parks, in promissory notes, and
Mhm.
a ton of different strategies where they can invest with different operators, different markets of the country, and different asset classes to create this cash flow stream that's diversified across the board in real estate or even in other outside businesses that we invest in different ways as well. Um, we do some accounts receivable financing and things like that. I own some other types of businesses that I invest in consistently as well and put the right teams in place. But what's cool is that investors can do this and get the right advice from people to be able to structure their deals and structure their performance. Now, you got to know how to do your homework, right? I have
Mhm.
a 200-point due diligence checklist that I go through whenever I'm investing with an operator. You never invest with anybody without doing your homework, hence the contractor example,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So do your background checks, do your criminal checks, ask for investor references, right? Are they being conservative on their numbers, right? I have two screens behind me for financial modeling that's my specialty. I love financial modeling. It's just the geek in me being a CPA, but I can skew numbers any way I want through those
Mhm.
things. So make sure you understand, hey, what are their assumptions in those deals, right? And do your homework. And we have a 200-point due diligence checklist. We can share that with everybody they want. My website is MatthewOwens.com with one T in Matthew, and you can download it for free if you guys want. We have tons of resources you guys can just have. We teach tons of free courses. We do a short-term rentals classes and single family classes and all kinds of cool stuff just for free for people,
Mhm.
just because it's so important that you do your homework and understand these deals so you know what questions to ask before you invest with anybody on any project, right? And so start slow. Start off with the minimum investments on these types of deals to learn how they work and read the legal docs. But what's cool is once you get through that initial learning curve on how to do your homework, I have investors that are traveling the world right now because they get cash flow. They're making 30, 50 grand a month with me on these strategies because and beginning to travel during their retirement years and not having to do the work and relying on us. They're getting secured against assets. They're getting, direct ownership and properties. I'm helping them with their tax and legal strategies and things like that to help them mitigate their taxes. And I even have one of the biggest benefits that we utilize that I found early on. Most investors need CPAs, they need
Mhm.
attorneys, they need realtors, they need teams, which is everything. If you don't
Mhm.
have the right team, you're dead in the water before you start. So developing that team around you, that structured team, will really put you on the right path to success. But making sure you know what questions to ask those team members is even more important because CPAs and attorneys and everybody else could suck really bad. And
Mhm.
so knowing what makes a good attorney or what makes a good CPA is important. And if they're not teaching you, they're the wrong CPAs or the wrong attorneys to be dealing with, right?
Yeah,
So,
no, totally
but
agree.
yeah, I love doing this for people because I see the cash flow coming in for them and I see what it's doing for them where they can quit their jobs and
Yeah.
they can go through and during that retirement have a reliable stream of income to work on. And I like investing in real estate because you get the tax benefits, you get the wealth creation through the long term, you get the inflation benefits and the inflation hedge, you get to leverage that investment and get that cash flow and do the value add. And I like investing in promissory notes because you get a consistent cash flow stream coming in. You get lower cost to the value and things like that. There I go with my CPA technical terms and all this stuff
Right.
again.
Well,
So
it's okay. I mean, there are technical terms involved, right? The
yeah,
beautiful thing about what you guys do, though, is you take all that technical stuff and you bring it down to something that's authentic and
right,
it's something people can understand, right?
right,
And the beautiful thing about the classes is you're explaining to them how this works and you're also
right.
educating them on what they should be asking. So here's a question for you. What's the single most important thing you've learned starting and owning and running OCG properties?
So the single most thing that I've learned is how to delegate things correctly and set up team members that are doing certain aspects of the job for you. For example, if I'm involved in every aspect of the asset management of a project
Mhm.
versus having a full-time person doing that, I'm going to be spread thin. I got more things that I'm doing, right? And I'm going
Right.
to be inefficient at that asset management piece or the property management piece that goes into the managing rentals directly, right? Usually you have a property management team and then an asset management team that oversees that, that's managing the managers on top of that. And then the managers, who's on their leasing staff, who's their construction staff, who's their accounting staff, understanding what that team looks like on the ground so I can properly delegate is key because the
Yeah.
more free time I have, the more time I can put into developing better processes, better systems, solving these problems to not get stolen from by a contractor, right?
Yeah.
Doing those things. And
Well,
it
you
was
know what to watch out for, right?
right, right.
Where
And
most
that's the
people
key.
don't.
Right.
You with me? So the whole idea of losing 60,000 on a 12-unit building, the whole idea of use of the half a million, right? That's all stuff that we didn't have to pay for as
Right.
customers that
Yeah.
that we benefit from because you paid for it.
Right.
You through the school of hard knocks, right? Learn the lessons that you need to learn. And you're not going to be perfect going forward, but you're certainly not going to make those mistakes again. Right.
Right.
And so it's a different situation where you're now looking at the plumbing on these 12-unit properties, right?
Yes.
You're
Yes.
right. It's cast iron. Come on, baby. It's falling
Yeah.
apart.
It's gonna fall
Cast
apart.
iron gets brittle. You can
Yes.
literally do this with it, right? The whole thing with the contractor, when to check their references, to go deep with
Right.
references and that kind of thing. So that's the thing that I think is sort of invaluable where you're concerned and where the company's concerned because you've gone ahead of all these people that are investing with you and you've made the mistakes. You've
I've
got the
gone through
lumps
the
to
learning
show it
curve.
and you've
Yeah.
learned the lessons, right?
Right.
So ocgproperties.com, is that right?
Yes, my main site is MatthewOwens.com with
One
one
T.
T in Matthew. I say my parents couldn't spell even though they're engineers and CPAs. So,
I love that though.
but
I love that,
yeah,
man. That makes you the
MatthewOwens.com
only
and
Matthew on the planet with one T, right? I mean, it's a good thing.
yeah, it sucks for the domain because someone else has two T's,
Right.
with MatthewOwens.com, and I was like, great, they're gonna type in two T's and think I'm some musician,
Right.
So,
No, one
but
T, only one T, because
yeah,
you're
one T.
differentiating yourself, right? Your parents knew they were doing that.
Right. And we do help people understand from an active operations standpoint, hey, this is how you raise capital.
Yeah.
This is how you manage rentals. This is how you do fix and flips and know your math right and all the things you should be asking a property manager or a contractor or different people because whether they're passive investors or active investors, they need to know those things so they can ask the right questions. They don't have to do
Yeah.
them, but they need to at least understand what questions to ask in the first place. Now on our deals, we have custom chat GBTs that or GBTs that answer every question and Q&As for people and all that kind of stuff, every question any investors ever asked. And we help a ton of people with the structuring of 1031 exchanges and replacement properties where we serve up replacement properties on a silver platter. Like I said, a lot of our international investors in Japan, they're buying properties because they can write off the house for over 5 years for Japanese tax law, for example, which was massively beneficial to them. So we go through and try to customize these types of strategies for specific investors based on their exact financial situation to mitigate the tax side of things, to structure it for their own personality. Some people are comfortable investing in a syndication where they are giving up control to an operator that's going to do all the work for them, that has the experience. Some investors need to own the rental themselves. They want to have that hard asset,
Yeah.
and that's great. That's understandable. Knowing your own risk tolerance level and what you're comfortable with is very, very important for your personal situation, right?
Yeah.
And in my eyes, getting through that learning curve, like you said, is probably the most value that we can bring to the table, because we know what not to do and be careful about. Like, we don't buy properties in the hood anymore because we learned the
Yeah.
lessons of not buying properties in the hood, because the
Right.
neighborhood will steal everything out of that house before it's rented, right?
Exactly.
So the things you got to be careful about.
Yeah. I appreciate you, bud. Thanks so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, buddy. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.